Step 42, embryo freezing. On day 5, you have one of these three decisions. One is a freeze all, which means you're going to freeze all the high-grade embryos you're going to get and you're not planning to do fresh transfer. Or fresh transfer of one of the high-grade embryos and freeze all remaining high-grade embryos. Or third is a decide on the day, which means you will look at how many high-grade embryos you have, then you decide whether you're going to transfer one of those embryos or whether you are going to freeze all the embryos, then they make that transfer decision in the future. When you assess embryos, you find out the embryos can be divided into three different categories: high-grade embryos, borderline grade embryos, and poor grade embryos. The high-grade embryos, these are blastocyst embryos, and they can be used for transfer or frozen that day on day 5 itself, because they survive freeze-thaw stress, and when you transfer them as a fresh, you get a good chance of pregnancy. Then in terms of borderline grade embryos, these embryos, some of them can be transferred on the day. Different clinics have different criteria for transferring borderline grade embryos, but they cannot be frozen on day 5 because they don't survive freeze-thaw stress, and you need to put these embryos in incubator and give them another 24 hours to see if they improve, if they become high grade. Poor grade embryos, these are the embryos which stop developing on day 2 or day 3 or degenerated. These embryos pretty much don't have a much chance. Still, you put these embryos in incubator and give them another 24 hours and assess on day 6. On day 6, if borderline grade embryo becomes high grade, then you can freeze that high grade embryo, and if it becomes poor grade, then you need to discard the borderline grade embryo. Similarly, poor grade embryos, they have extremely small chance of becoming high grade on day 6. If they don't become high grade, then you discard them. This strategy helps you to identify how many high grade and borderline and poor grade embryos you have on day 5, and decide which embryo you should transfer on day 5, and which embryo you can freeze on day 5, and which embryo you can freeze on day 6. You cannot do transfer on day 6, but you can freeze embryos which become high grade, because if you give embryos extra 24 hours, they can repair themselves. If embryo has got potential to become baby, it can repair itself and become a high grade. It's proven to be high grade, then you should freeze that embryo and use in the future IVF cycle.